Well, hello and welcome to our Bible study, the next in our series on women in the Bible. This week we're jumping back into the the New Testament. We looked at Sarah and Hagar from the Old Testament last week, and so as we have started, we're just going to swap back and forth for as long as we can. So this week we're looking at two women among quite a few, obviously, who were healed by Jesus Christ, and looking at just some general principles that we can see. The first of these women is that of Peter's mother-in-law, and we see this recorded in all three of the Synoptic Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark and Luke. So Matthew chapter 8 verses 14 to 15, Mark chapter 1 verses 29 to 31, and also Luke chapter 4 and verses 38 and 39. And so, as I said, each of these accounts records Jesus' healing of the mother of Peter's wife. And the significance of the story is twofold. First, the immediate restoration to health, and also its symbolic nature. Matthew uses the incident to stress Christ's sovereignty, Mark to illustrate his servanthood, and Luke to demonstrate his compassionate humanity. And this is in keeping with all three of those Gospels' larger purposes. In a home in Capernaum, described by Mark as that of Peter and Andrew, a woman lay ill. Luke, who was of course a physician, he informs us that her fever was high, and the accounts together tell us that the family requested Jesus to heal her. She was important to them, obviously, and also Jesus being very close to those intimately connected with her, this woman was important to Jesus as well. He took her by the hand, and her strength immediately returned, as only Christ can do. And she got up and began serving the guests. It always strikes me as quite remarkable that here she has, in a state of high fever, which is incredibly draining, often a signifier of a significant illness. And I'm sure any and all of you who have had a fever would need some time to recuperate, and obviously Jesus can heal someone to full strength, but nevertheless you'd think she'd like some recuperation time. But I get the sense that this is her decision, that she's wanting to provide care for those that are in her household, and that this is something that she does by default. And I just think it's a really remarkable attitude, an attitude of service that's really ingrained, of hospitality. I used to say that my grandmother had springs in her seat, because whenever she sat down she was up again, always getting someone a cup of tea or more cake or something else. My dad used to joke that he wouldn't have even finished his dinner plate before Grandma was up and ready to take it and wash it up and bring dessert or something else. But I think this is something that we see, particularly, I guess, in women who have traditionally taken on the role of homemakers and the primary responsibility for hospitality at times. And this desire to, whoever comes across the threshold, that is someone to serve. And even if I'm just recovered from a significant fever, I'm going to serve. Of course, the value of a mother to a family has always been, continues to be, and will always be substantial. And Jesus certainly understood this family's potential loss. And his miracle also reinforced his valuation of women, particularly in a society where many considered them to be perhaps inferior. I think this is an important point that we will continue to return to and see in the second part of this lesson as well. that Jesus saw women, and he saw them in a way that I think a large section of their contemporary society did not. In seeing them, he was able to show care and concern and compassion and, where appropriate, healing. This theme we looked at regularly occurs in the parables as well. Jesus urging us, and we need to ask ourselves, do we see people in the margins, people in need, people looked over by our wider contemporary society? Jesus did, and he showed us that we need to as well. And this brings us to the second woman in our story, the woman who had a hemorrhage, who was healed. We find this account in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 20 to 22, Mark 25 to 34, Luke 8, 43 to 48, again in all three of the synoptic gospels. For 12 years this woman had suffered with chronic hemorrhaging just meaning bleeding that's obviously difficult to stop, constantly recurring. Visiting physicians, no doubt, had only given her, would seem, more pain, depleted funds, perhaps even left her worse than when she began, certainly unable to heal her sufficiently. She'd tried everything, it would seem, and as with health that hangs around like this, she could have become a real cynic. And then she heard about Jesus, and it's remarkable, isn't it? Her approach to Jesus is quite different to that of most. She came from behind and she simply touched the edge of his outer garment, hoping no one, including Jesus, would notice. And yet it would seem, driven by faith, that this would make a difference. We're not told whether she felt unworthy to talk to him, fearful perhaps because of her uncleanness. We read about in Leviticus 15, 25 to 33. Or perhaps concerned that there would be no chance of an audience with him in such a crowd. Both scenarios, I think, would be legitimate, or at least understandable. We're told that she had enough faith in the person of Christ to believe that just touching his clothes would prove life-changing. And she was right. Though the passage makes clear that her body was healed at the time that she reached out to him, that wasn't enough for Jesus, was it? He wanted to give her more. Jesus came to an abrupt halt and demanded, "Who touched me?" The disciples were incredulous. What was he talking about? It's a huge crowd. There's lots of people. We can't identify an individual. But of course, where they saw the many, Jesus Christ saw the one. He knew that power had gone out of him, but that the healing hadn't really been completed. She was more than just a hemorrhaging body. She was a woman, and she was a woman in need of Christ's care and ultimately of the salvation that Christ offers. Her approach was three-faceted. She came forward trembling with fear and fell down at his feet, and she told the whole truth. He gave her a fourfold response. He called her daughter, a real intimate and endearing term. He assured her that her body was healed, and it was healed every bit as much by her faith in him as any sort of touching of the garment. It wasn't a magical coat of many colours or anything like this. It was that interaction and that trust in Jesus Christ. He sent her away free from all anxiety. He said to her, "Go in peace." Surely that was every bit as much as what she wanted as the physical ailment she suffered. And really, ultimately, he offers salvation of her soul in a particular way. In Mark 5:34, the Greek word sozo is used, and that word is translated saved. In the context here, in the way that the Gospel's narrative unfolds, this occurs between the healing of a demon-possessed man and the raising of a dead girl. And you think, well, maybe this woman's situation could be considered a lesser concern. Certainly, I think it would be by human measurements. But not by Christ, was it? And this is the fundamental point. Christ stops for everyone. He sees everyone. He has concern for everyone. And the question I need to answer is, do I? Thanks very much.